Day 13. The night went by with the double low not just in the air, but in the skin. Sleeping became a luxury. Waking up became punishment. Those deep, inhuman moans kept rolling until just before dawn, when everything finally went silent. Predator-satisfied silence, the kind that doesn't bring relief, only warning. The speaker, the man we dragged out of the corridor, barely slept. Sometimes his tongue clicked in his sleep. Sometimes a muffled no escaped, like he was still answering commands that now only existed in his memory. The woman woke with a face carved in exhaustion, the notebook still in her hands, always in her hands. "We need to move," she said. To where? Away from the double low. She drew in a long breath, and closer to answers. The next point on the map was N6, marked by her husband with a single line, where the red vest fell. No explanation, no warning, just that. And after what we saw on day 12, anything he wrote felt like prophecy. We packed. The speaker came with us. We couldn't leave him there, tied, hurt, and with half a throat trained to mimic monsters. He limped. It hurt to watch. But worse than that, it scared me. Because every step he took carried a faint metallic echo, the dented whistle hanging at his neck. I grabbed it. "If this ever sounds, we're dead." "I know," he whispered. "It was how they found me the first time." He lowered his head like he was apologizing for existing. Half an hour of silent walking was enough to know something was wrong in Sector N. No infected, no bodies, no sound. Houses stood open but intact, doors hanging wide, food half-eaten on tables, chairs tipped over, light fixtures swaying without wind. It didn't look abandoned, it looked interrupted, like everyone had left at the exact same second, or had been taken at the exact same second. The woman pointed to a crooked sign on the ground. "Collect area, response 7. "Response," she murmured. "Maybe classifications," I said. "Of who?" "Of whoever's running the experiments. The ones who train them? The ones who command them." Every day, the world felt less overrun by the dead, and more overrun by living people who'd misplaced their souls. The speaker stepped up to a wall, touched a smear of dried paint. "They were here," he whispered. "They who?" I asked. He closed his eyes like he was tapping into broken files. "The ones with vests." His throat tightened. "Red, all of them." We traded looks. Her husband had drawn them in the notebook, men in red vests with sound rods in their hands, pushing infected around, steering groups of dead like they were wild dogs. I hadn't seen anyone wearing red since the collapse started. Red was target color, die-fast color. So why pick that color? The answer was lying a few steps ahead. We turned the corner and saw it. A red vest stretched out on the asphalt, caked in dirt, stained with blood, ripped down the middle like something had tried to tear it off the body that wore it. The woman walked up slowly. "This is just like in the notebook." "Yeah," I said. "But why did it fall here?" The speaker, voice low, answered, "It didn't fall. It was thrown." "By who?" "By us." "Us?" "The captured." Silence. A thin wind pushed the vest just enough to make it look like someone was still inside it. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "Because," he lifted his eyes, shaking, "if you take the vest off one of them, the infected stop obeying." His whole body trembled. "The vest is the seal." "Seal of what?" He swallowed hard, almost choking on the word. "Of command." A pause. "And of ownership." My blood went cold. "Ownership?" "They belong to someone." "Who?" "The caller." The woman went pale. "The caller." Same name the speaker muttered when we heard the double low. I crouched and touched the vest. Cold. Tiny devices were sewn into the seams, metal points with minuscule holes. "This is output," I said. "Vibration output." "Not sound," the speaker added. "Vibration." I looked at the woman. "This controls infected." She closed her eyes. "My husband knew. That's why he marked it on the map." Then the speaker dropped the sentence that twisted Day 13 out of shape. "This vest isn't empty." "What do you mean?" "Look inside." I flipped the vest over. There it was, stitched into the lining by hand. 21. And beneath it, a line written in dark ink, almost erased. "If I fall, don't let me get back up." The cold inside my chest turned to stone. "That's a request," the woman said, "from one of them." She breathed in, sharp. "They're not volunteers." The speaker confirmed in a voice broken by memory. "No one wears red by choice." "They force them?" I asked. "They change them." We didn't get time to process that, because that's when we heard footsteps. Human footsteps. Several. We ducked behind an overturned car. The footsteps entered the street. 4 men came into view. Improvised weapons. Faces filthy. Walking fast like they were on patrol in claimed territory. None of them wore vests, but all had scar rings around their necks, rope narcs, gag marks, metal marks. The first one stopped by the vest on the ground. "Another one down," he muttered. "That's bad. Very bad." The woman squeezed my arm. "They're not subordinates," she whispered. "They're survivors." "Yeah," I said, "but survivors of what?" The 4 studied the vest with real fear, the kind of fear from people who've already seen the worst. "If 21's down," one said, "the caller will send a replacement. He'll tell them to grab another." The 4th man answered, "We have to warn the warehouse." Warehouse. Her husband had written about a warehouse too. "Don't go in. Not alive, not dead." As they started moving, the speaker behind us began to shake. "Don't let them see me, please." "Why?" I ran from them. Tears welled up. "They'll take me back." "They trained you?" the woman whispered. "They train everyone." A ragged breath. "Until there's no voice left." The wind shifted. One of the men in the street looked straight toward our hiding spot. "Hey," he said. "You feel that?" He went quiet, then raised his arm. "Signal." They spread out into a rough formation, and that's when we saw who was coming behind them. Not infected. Something staggering in the shadows. Someone wearing a red vest. It wasn't just a man in a vest. The vest was heavier, stiffer, small boxes fixed to the shoulders. And his face? Half transformed. White eyes, cracked skin, jaw trembling like it was trying to shape a sound it couldn't quite complete. Behind him, 5 infected in a straight line. "Them," the woman whispered. "That's a mix." "Not a mix," the speaker rasped. "Forced evolution." The men on the street backed away, terrified. 21 turned into that? I asked. The speaker shook his head. "No." "Then who is that?" He answered, voice ruined by memory. "That's 22." The woman's knees almost buckled. "What happens when they put the vest on?" "They train," he whispered. "And when the body can't take it, the collar finishes the job." As if on cue, the red-vested half-thing turned its head toward us. The 5 infected behind him copied the motion at exactly the same time. They hadn't seen us, hadn't heard us. It was the smell, or the fear, or the wrong breath the speaker took. "We have to move," I murmured. "Now." But before we could shift a muscle, 22 raised his arm. The infected took one step forward, in perfect sync. He wasn't a leader. He was an antenna. And somewhere behind him, far deeper in that dead neighborhood, a sound rose that tore apart whatever courage was left. A flawless double low, deep, wide, heavy, coming from a human throat, speaking like something dead. The caller, the real one. The speaker collapsed to his knees. He's found you. His eyes shone with sheer dread. He's found you. The woman gripped my hand. We have to run. We can't leave the speaker. He'll slow us down. He's saved our lives. Before we could decide, 22 started walking toward us, step by step. 2 sounds leaked out of him at once, a human click and an infected moan. Behind him, the whole line followed. I tightened my grip on the metal pipe. It's not just us surviving anymore. No, she said, they're evolving too.
Observation number 27. When the enemy learns to command you by smell, by sound, and by fear, it's not the end of the world anymore. It's the start of a new species.
We slipped away through a narrow side alley, the kind that barely remembered being a street. The speaker limped between us, every breath of his sounding like a confession. Behind, we heard the vest units move, those half-changed bodies and their leashed infected, shifting formation, following whatever command the double low fed them. We stumbled over trash, slid along damp walls, cut through a service corridor that reeked of mold and old frying oil. No time to look back. At one corner, the woman grabbed my arm. If they mark us, I know. We become response, or resource. We ducked under a half-collapsed metal shutter and squeezed into what used to be a repair shop. The world outside kept vibrating with distant pulses, short whistles, long moans, and now and then the unmistakable double low rolling through the concrete like thunder in bone. We stayed in the dark, listening to the neighborhood being rearranged. Not by chance, by design. When my hands finally steadied enough to write, I opened the notebook. I wrote, Day 13. The red vests are slaves. The caller is the master. And now they know exactly where we are. The man in the red vest isn't just an enemy. He's a warning. A warning that someone out there is teaching dead and living to work together. And every time a vest falls, it isn't a lost soldier. It's a piece being swapped. They don't lose forces. They replace them. The woman closed the notebook. The speaker cried quietly in a corner, hands over his mouth like he was afraid even his sobs could be trained. And all I managed to say was, Day 14 is going to be worse. End of log, Day 13.